Luke. Thanks for joining us. So, we're going to be talking about insurance in today's sign industry and what sign makers should know. Just diving in on the first question, what are the biggest insurance risks you're seeing sign makers, installers facing today?
I mean, for the business in itself, it's not being covered correctly. It's the inadequate cover within their policy that they have standing. And that could be anywhere from the public liability side of things, where they might only have £1 million cover. If they're doing work on shopping centres, for example, they should have a minimum of 5 million. A lot of procurement teams who actually employ the signage installers, or the shops that are employing the signage installers or the signage companies, will usually define the limit of indemnity, which is the maximum they will pay out on a public liability section of cover. However, it's not always the case.
Okay.
It's not always forthcoming, and when something goes wrong, it's important to have that adequate cover in place, just in case someone does something wrong, something gets damaged, or there could be defective workmanship, which is always hard to prove, really.
Right. And how do you think the insurance landscape has changed over recent years? Obviously there's been a lot of movement in the market, but what are the key changes you've seen in terms of sort of more regulations, talent shortage, that sort of thing?
Yeah, insurance is constantly evolving. It's constantly aware of who is being insured. It's constantly aware of how it needs to update activities that certain businesses are undertaking. So, complete example, car wrapping or car vehicle graphics. A lot of signage companies or print companies that do a bit of signage will also diversify into vehicle graphics and car wrapping. We had a case recently that I was looking at where the underwriter was stipulating that parts cannot be removed from the vehicle. Now, my experience in the industry is that in order to do a proper wrap, you need to remove door handles, light clusters, mirrors, badges. They have to come off. So this was an area that I had to confirm with the client and go back to the underwriter and say, look, this is the activity. This is how they're doing this activity, and this needs covering. You cannot exclude this from cover. They are only removing light clusters. It may be a couple of clips and a wire or door handles, etc., but they're not getting involved in locking mechanisms and bits and pieces, and not going into the belly of the beast and messing with the engine and stuff like that. They're just putting graphics to the outside of the vehicle. So 9 times out of 10, things will go on correctly. When it does go on, we've broken a clip. Everyone's broken a clip. You try and replace the clip or you fix it correctly. But things happen, and that's why it's important to have things not excluded from cover, because when it comes to the point of the insurer saying, did you remove this piece of trim? And you say, yes, of course I did, I'm wrapping the vehicle. If it's excluded from cover, they're going to say you're not covered or excluded. Whereas if we define that up front, it's right there. They can't contest it. We've said we will be removing these parts. It's there and then. But other areas, I mean, they're becoming more aware of the machinery. They're becoming more aware of the cost of machinery that signage companies are using. Printing presses, for example. Doesn't matter if you're on a flatbed or reel fed, whether you're using a Verla blade or some other form of CAD cutter. They're all expensive pieces of machinery, and insurers are now understanding that you can't just walk into a unit and pick up a Vela blade and run away with it. It's not a theft risk if you're in a high theft area. But they're also coming out more. They're doing a lot more surveys on businesses. And in the long run, that adds value to a business. That adds value to our clients within signage, because when we have those site surveys, they are following the letter of the law within the policy. They're going according to what the policy dictates and what you should have in place as a business. So it helps the business stay between the lines of the insurance. Exactly as with the vehicle graphics, it helps determine where can I operate, how can I operate, how should I operate, and what should I have in place. And within those surveys, generally, we have a couple of risk improvement requirements. And they're generally actioned very quickly, because signage guys, printers, everyone within the graphics industry, generally speaking, is quite risk averse, and it all works in our favour as well.
Right. So you've mentioned quite a lot of areas where it's non-negotiable, but what are the other areas of coverage that you'd say are non-negotiable for today's modern sign businesses?
It's more about making sure that you define your activities and you make sure that your broker is representing you correctly to the underwriters, to the insurers, so to the Alliances, the AIGs, the AXAs, all of the big insurers. Is making sure that the trade is correctly defined and the activities are discussed. So make sure your broker's asking you about what you're getting up to. Make sure within your paperwork, it's not just saying, I don't know, I'll do a live example now. I'll jump into a policy and have a look at some sign trades. The sign trade we use as a general rule is signage, installation, service and repair. And we use that alongside a printing trade because then you can determine how much the percentages of each activity. But if I go into sign as a trade, it gives me a number of different options. And generally speaking, not one signage company is going to be tied into just one trade. So you get options like sign manufacturing metal illuminated, sign manufacturing metal non-illuminated, same with plastic, same with wood, sign wholesaling illuminated or non-illuminated, sign writing, sign writer vehicle. So there's lots of opportunity there to put yourself down a rabbit hole and say you're just doing signs, metal, non-illuminated. What happens if you're doing a job and it's got lights over it and you cause
Mm,
some property damage? And then when
right.
the
And being
assessor comes out, it's not been defined within on your
yeah,
trade from the outset. So if we put you down as you print, but you also do signage, installation, service and repair, it covers that angle. So it's covering that bracket. And there may be a percentage where it adds a slight bit of cost, but you're covered. And you can
yeah,
rest assured that you're covered for that activity that you're taking place.
yeah. What about other areas where there might be some blind spots where sign businesses are sometimes underinsured or overexposed? For example, cyber risk or, subcontractor liability. Do they have to make sure that they're including all those areas as well?
Yeah. A live example again, speaking to a client currently, their current policy covers them to 10 meters height work.
All right.
They're working up to 30 meters. And they weren't aware that they were only covered to 10 meters. Now, 10 meters, 15 meters generally are the limits of a policy, but through discussing the activities, through going through their website, looking at the portfolio that they've got on their website and their Instagram, I can see that they're going to much higher than 10 meters. So it's getting an understanding of how often they're going to those heights. What
Right.
percentage of your turnover reflects the times that you go beyond 15 meters? How are you going beyond 15 meters? How is it done? Are the people that you're working with IPAF trained? Do they have certifications for mobile elevated working platforms, the MEWPs? All of these things help in reducing that potential of premium loading, which is an
Yeah.
underwriter term for I'm going to stick 0 on the end of it. Other areas that we see it fall short are business interruption. If a
Hmm.
business was to be affected by an insured peril, which is broker speak for if it was to hit the fan
Hmm.
today, business interruption cover steps in and makes sure that you can still pay your rent, your rates, your employees, cover your overheads.
Mm.
We do it on an estimated gross profit model, and we always recommend doing it over 2 years. But time and time again, we see companies insured on their business interruption for 12 months because it keeps the premium low. But
Oh,
you're not going to recover a business within 12 months. It's very rare that you can recover a business fully within 12 months when you take into account loss of employees, loss of business, loss of clients, loss of trust within the industry, loss of connections. If you have to close the door for 6 to 8 months because you're waiting for equipment on back order, or you're only able to get some smaller equipment to tide you over for the time being, you're not going to be able to work at the capacity you were working at before, and business interruption kicks in to save the day, really. It's just, it needs to be adequate. It needs to be in there for 18 to 24 months. And we always recommend 24 months.
Yeah,
Cyber
yeah,
is another area.
cyber is, yeah. Does that come under the business interruption area, or is that a
Sometimes it can. Yeah, sometimes it can. What I've found from looking at a number of different policies is there's your standard commercial combined policy for a business. And when you have cyber bolted onto your commercial combined, it has an extremely low limit of indemnity, and it's there for the name only, really. It'll add a little bit to your premium and you'll
Mm,
feel like you've got cyber cover. But in the reality of a cyber attack or something happening, a phishing scam, someone clicking the wrong link, your system's being taken down, it's not going to cover you very much, and it's not going to cover you for very long. Our absolute minimum recommended is £250,000 limit of indemnity. And what we see within cyber policies that are bolted into commercial combined policies is a limit of indemnity of 10, 15, £25,000. So it's not worth it. And it doesn't bring you what a cyber policy should bring you. A cyber policy should bring you a minimum limit of indemnity, so the maximum they'll pay out. The minimum should be £250,000, 250,000, and it should also provide you with staff training. It should also provide you with micro penetration testing to see how vulnerable you are. That will also look at dark web exposures and tell you how many email addresses could have been breached or passwords have been breached. It will give you that information to let you know what you need to do in the immediate future with your IT teams or your outsourced IT company in order to make the business more secure. And it will also do employee training and phishing simulations. So you'll be able to do phishing simulations to report on, okay, these employees have done okay, but who needs a bit more training? How can we get these employees a bit more training? And we work with some really good partners on the cyber side of things. I always look into the bowels of the cyber policies because I find it fascinating. It's just, they can be a bit annoying to put in place because they do ask a lot of questions about multi-factor authentication. They ask about endpoint detection and resolution. They ask things that generally you're not going to immediately know the answer to. But if you put me in touch with your IT guy, I'll work it out with them.
yeah, that's really good advice. So what would your advice be? It sounds like, side businesses really need to take a very comprehensive approach, but in terms of them trying to keep their premiums more affordable, what would your advice be to, maybe new or smaller sign businesses?
First and foremost, be as transparent as possible with your broker. No one
Right.
likes buying insurance. I don't like buying insurance. I'm looking at insurance quotes at the moment for my car. I don't have a fancy car. I've got a hairdresser's car. And no one likes buying insurance. But when you need it, you want it to be correct. And you want it to pay out what you need it to pay out in order to continue in whatever capacity that may be. I travelled country day in, day out. So for me, I'm going to be looking at my car insurance premiums, and I'm going to be looking at the extensions of those covers. However, I'm also going to be looking at the exclusions to make sure that, earlier example, work at height isn't limited to 10 meters if I know that I'm going beyond 10 meters. So it's that transparency with your broker that will really make sure that you're getting the best cover. And if they're a good broker, they'll be getting you the best deal as well. Also, control your risks and document everything. Make sure your risk assessments are in place and make sure you know what health and safety requirements there are. And if you are working at height, if you're using heat guns or, any heat generating equipment, angle grinders, hot air guns, welding equipment, I know it's rare within signage. However, there are some frames that require some welding. If you're using those, make it clear. Understand how much of your activities equate for that work. So if it's 2%, let us know it's 2%. It's going to have very minimal effect. But if something happens, when it comes to a claim, you'll be able to say, yeah, we did this because of this, and this happened, and you're covered. That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. So as long as you've got all your documentation in place, You're transparent with your broker. We can represent you in the best way possible and find you the very best deal in the market. And then the other side of things as well. They might cost a little bit of outlay if you're just setting up or you're a new business, but get certified. I mentioned earlier the IPAF training for the mobile elevated working platforms. There's other providers that do working at height training. If you've got some form of certification, and particularly recognised certifications, it's like using a Thatcham approved padlock to lock up a motorcycle. It's going to bring your premium down. Yeah, you might have to use it every time you lock your bike up, but it's going to work in your favour in the long run.
Yeah. You mentioned about documentation. Any further thoughts there on how that can help sign companies avoid claims or disputes?
Yeah. So documentation, from a documentation point of view, you'll find that a lot of insurers will provide access to risk assessment documents. So
Okay.
within your current policy, you'll have access to risk assessment documents. Under our print scheme policy, you have access to, it's called the Art Risk Management Platform. And within there's a whole guide of health and safety, how to do risk assessments, templated documents and bits and pieces like that. And then it's just repetition. It's understanding what you're doing. It's getting to understand what is required of that risk assessment. And once you've done a few, it's fairly easy. I used to do some mobile DJing, and I used to do them for that, just for setting up the speakers, because part of my insurance was you have to risk assess the area you're setting up with. A couple of my speakers weighed quite a lot. So I had to make sure that I was setting up him in the correct area. I had some hazard tape on the legs of the stands that I was using at that time. I was by the by. But it is looking at your current policy, speaking to your broker. Do I have access to any of this? On our print scheme, as I say, you've got access to the Arch Risk Management Platform. That brings in a whole load of other additions. There's far too many to go into here, but there's a lot of health and safety tools, lots of risk assessment tools, lots of advice, lots of templates that can be used. And those assessments, that documentation doesn't always have to be word heavy. You can do it with pictures, you can do it with video, you can show that we're going to be doing this here, this is how we're going to be doing it, this is how we are doing it, this is how we did do it. As long
Yeah.
as you've got evidence, no one can
On your
dispute that.
mobile phone or yeah.
Exactly. And then you can just stick that in a folder on Google Photos or Dropbox or
Yeah.
whatever it may be within the way that you work. As long as you've documented it all in some way, it's undisputable at that point.
Yeah. It's really great advice, Luke. So just, looking into your crystal ball here, what do you see as new emerging risks that, sign makers should be thinking about or just getting prepared for, any trends you're seeing moving forward?
Cyber. We're seeing a lot more of press activity around cyber attacks. And a cyber attack isn't someone has found your website and they've targeted you because you're a massive business and you're making really great signage. It's very, very rarely that incident. It's very rarely going to be someone you've upset within the industry or something along those lines. It's 9 times out of 10 going to be human error. It's going to be someone chancing their arm, sending out emails to everyone and their mother, and someone clicking a link that they should not have done. Within the print industry, recently, we've seen quite a bit. CPI Books, for example, they were victim of that. Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, TFL, they've all been recent examples. And yes, Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, TFL, they're big names. They were probably targeted in some form, but you can guarantee it was down to human error. We still don't know much about it, but we know that they're losing an absolute buck ton of money. So no one wants to be in that situation. It is
Yeah.
cyber, and it's making sure that you've got the correct cyber policy in place, not a bolt on to your commercial combined that offers you very little cover. It needs to be a standalone policy with a specialist provider who offers you the phishing simulation, can report on that, and can offer employee training. And the best ones offer you access to a risk engineering team who can actually assist you in making sure that you're working from the most secure environment possible.
Yeah, and really interesting what you're saying about training. I mean, that must be crucial for quite a lot of sign makers to just understand what their risk is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have a web portal or an email address, you're at risk. It's just because you have humans interacting with an online system, and you have various areas where a human is doing work from bits and pieces. So if you have portals where clients can upload artwork or designs or, CAD templates for the way something needs to be sent, that's an area of a website. Could be an FTP, could be whatever it may be. It's an area that is vulnerable in some form. So it's about tightening down those screws and making it as rigid as possible while still being flexible enough to work from.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Luke, so much for your time. It's been really insightful. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it too.